Sarah wiped the sweat from her forehead as she watched the morning shift reports scroll across her screen. The mining station on Series 7 was running smoothly, which meant another day of work in the asteroid belt. She had been the station commander for 3 years now, and every day brought new challenges. The asteroid was rich in rare metals that Earth needed badly. Her crew of 48 people worked around the clock to dig them out. It was dangerous work. One mistake could mean death in the cold vacuum of space, but Sarah and her team were good at what they did. They had to be. "Commander to the communications room," came the voice over the intercom. It was Mike, her communications officer. He sounded worried. Sarah walked through the narrow metal corridors of the station. The walls hummed with the sound of life support systems working hard to keep them all alive. She found Mike staring at his screen with a confused look on his face. "What is it, Mike?" she asked. "We're getting some strange readings from Sector 7, he said. "Something big crashed into the asteroid about 2 hours ago. The energy signatures don't match anything in our database." Sarah frowned. "Could be space debris, or maybe a damaged ship." "That's what I thought at first," Mike said, "but the readings are getting stronger, and they're moving." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Moving how? Like something is trying to get out. Sarah grabbed her helmet and suit. "Get teams 3 and 4 ready. Full environmental gear. We're going to take a look." 20 minutes later, Sarah led a group of 6 people through the mining tunnels toward Sector 7. They moved carefully through the rough-cut passages. The gravity here was weak, so they used magnetic boots to stay on the ground. As they got closer to the crash site, Sarah noticed the walls looked different. They were smooth and glassy, like something very hot had melted the rock. The air felt electric, making the hair on her arms stand up. "Commander," whispered Jenny Park, the team's engineer, "my readings are going crazy. Whatever is in there is putting out a lot of energy." They reached the edge of a large cavern that hadn't been there before. In the center sat a ship unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. It was black and sleek, with strange symbols glowing along its sides. Parts of it were buried deep in the asteroid's rock. "Stay back," Sarah ordered. "Keep your distance and scan everything." But before anyone could move, the ship's hull began to split open with a sound like tearing metal. A ramp extended from the ship and touched the cavern floor. Green light spilled out from inside, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Something walked down the ramp. It was tall, at least 7 feet, with dark green scales covering its body. Its arms were long and muscled, ending in hands with razor-sharp claws. Its head was elongated like a snake's, but with burning yellow eyes that seemed to look right through them. It wore some kind of armor that gleamed in the strange light. Sarah felt her team freeze behind her. She had seen aliens before in the news feeds from Earth, but this one was different. This one looked like it was built for killing. The creature's eyes locked onto Sarah. It opened its mouth and spoke in perfect English, though its voice was like gravel grinding together. "I am warlord of the Empire. You will surrender this facility to me immediately." Sarah stepped forward, keeping her voice steady. "This is a civilian mining operation. We're not armed. What do you want?" Made a sound that might have been laughter. "What I want is to show you insects what happens when you resist the Empire. Your species will learn to fear us before we take your worlds." He began walking toward them with slow, confident steps. Each footfall echoed in the cavern. Sarah could see the muscles moving under his scales. She could see the confidence in his yellow eyes. He thought this would be easy. "Stay calm," Sarah whispered to her team. "Back away slowly." But was faster than he looked. In 3 quick strides, he crossed the distance between them. His clawed hand shot out and grabbed Sarah by the collar of her environmental suit. He lifted her clean off the ground as if she weighed nothing. Sarah's feet dangled in the weak gravity. She could smell something like sulfur coming from the alien's skin. His grip was like a steel vice around her throat. "You will watch," hissed, "as I break each of your pathetic crew members one by one. Then you will broadcast a message to your people telling them what awaits them." Sarah looked into those burning yellow eyes. She saw cruelty there. She saw the confidence of a predator who had done this many times before. On dozens of worlds, this same scene had played out. Aliens had begged for mercy. They had surrendered. They had broken. But had made one very big mistake. He had grabbed a human, and humans didn't break the way other species did. Sarah smiled. "You picked the wrong species to mess with," she said quietly. Before could react, Sarah's hand moved to her belt and pressed a small red button. Immediately, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed red. The sound echoed off the cavern walls. At the same time, Sarah drove her knee upward with all the force she could manage. Her target was the spot just below's armor where she could see softer scales. The blow connected perfectly. Made a choking sound, and his grip loosened for just a moment. That was all Sarah needed. She twisted in his grasp, using moves she had learned in military training years ago. Her hands grabbed his wrist, and she used his own strength against him, breaking free and dropping to the ground. She rolled away and came up in a fighting stance. Around her, she could hear her team moving, following the emergency protocols they had drilled 100 times. Straightened up, his eyes now filled with surprise and growing anger. He had expected fear. He had expected surrender. Instead, he was looking at a human who was ready to fight. "You will regret that, insect," he snarled. Sarah activated her comm unit. "This is Commander. We have a hostile alien on board. Initiate Protocol 7. All teams to emergency stations." Throughout the station, her crew was already moving. They had trained for this day, even though they had hoped it would never come. Now it was time to show this alien what humans could do when they were cornered. Stared at the human female who had just broken free from his grip. In all his years of conquest across the galaxy, no inferior species had ever dared to fight back after he showed them his strength. They usually fell to their knees and begged for mercy. But this tiny creature was standing there, calm and ready. Her team hadn't run away screaming either. They were moving with purpose, like they had done this before. "You do not understand what you have done," growled. His voice echoed off the cavern walls. "I have crushed beings twice your size. I have burned worlds that dared to resist the Empire." Sarah kept her eyes on him while speaking into her comm unit. "Jenny, get to Section C and lock down the blast doors. Mike, cut power to all non-essential systems. Tom, I need you in the control room right now." Around the cavern, her team was already moving. They spread out in different directions, not running in panic but following a plan. Watched them go, confused by their calm efficiency. "Your pack abandons you," he said to Sarah. "They know they cannot help you." Sarah almost smiled. "Pack, you really don't know much about humans, do you?" Lunged forward, his claws extended. He was fast for his size, but Sarah was already moving. She dove to the side, rolled behind a large piece of mining equipment, and came up running toward the tunnel entrance. Followed, his heavy footsteps pounding on the rock floor. The human was quick, but she was still just running away. This was more like what he expected. Soon he would catch her, and then the real lesson would begin. But as they entered the main corridor, something strange happened. Lights began shutting off behind them as they passed. Emergency barriers started sliding down from the ceiling. Sarah was leading him somewhere specific. "Running will only make your death slower," called out as he chased her through the twisting passages. Sarah didn't answer. She was too busy thinking. 3 years on this station had taught her every inch of its layout. She knew where every maintenance hatch was, every emergency system, every weak point in the structure. More importantly, she knew how to use them. She led through a series of turns, always staying just ahead of his reaching claws. Behind them, she could hear the station systems responding to her team's commands. Blast doors were sealing off sections. Gravity generators were being adjusted. Air was being rerouted. What didn't understand was that humans had learned to live in places that would kill most other species. Deep space, radiation fields, asteroid belts full of deadly debris. They had built machines to help them survive, and now those same machines could be weapons. Sarah reached a section where the corridor opened into a larger chamber filled with ore processing equipment. Giant machines hummed and sparked as they crushed rock and separated metals. She paused at the entrance, breathing hard. Appeared behind her, his eyes burning with anger. "End of the tunnel, little insect. Now you face me with nowhere to run." "Who said I was running?" Sarah asked. She pressed a control on her wrist unit. Suddenly, the floor beneath shifted. The section he was standing on was actually a platform used for positioning heavy equipment. As it tilted, he lost his balance and stumbled forward. Sarah was already moving again. She grabbed a heavy wrench from a nearby tool rack and swung at its head as he tried to recover. The metal tool struck his skull with a loud clang, but his thick scales absorbed most of the impact. Still, it was enough to make him stumble again. And in that moment of confusion, Sarah did something that shocked him even more. Instead of trying to run away, she moved closer to him. Her hands found a control panel on the wall. She yanked open a protective cover and hit a large red button. Immediately, warning sirens began blaring throughout the chamber. "Emergency vent in 30 seconds," came an automated voice from hidden speakers. "All personnel evacuate immediately." Realized what was happening just as Sarah dove behind a massive ore crusher. The chamber was designed to vent directly into space in case of toxic gas buildup. When those vents opened, everything not bolted down would be sucked out into the vacuum. He tried to reach the exit, but Sarah had timed it perfectly. The blast doors at both ends of the chamber slammed shut, sealing him inside. Emergency clamps engaged on all the machinery, locking everything in place. 10 seconds to emergency vent," the voice announced. Looked around desperately. His armor could protect him in space for a while, but getting sucked out would mean losing his prey. Worse, it would mean admitting that a human had outmaneuvered him. At the last second, he grabbed onto a massive support beam and held on with all his strength. The vent ports opened with a roar like thunder. Air rushed out of the chamber, carrying with it anything loose. Felt his feet lift off the ground as the powerful suction tried to pull him toward space. His claws scraped against the metal beam as he fought to hold on. After 30 seconds that felt like hours, the vents closed again. Emergency systems began refilling the chamber with air, dropped to the floor, shaken and angry. But when he looked around, Sarah was gone. From hidden speakers throughout the chamber, her voice echoed around him. "Welcome to human space, warlord. You wanted to see what happens when you threaten us. Let me show you." The lights in the chamber began flashing in a pattern. Red, then white, then red again. Recognized it as some kind of signal, but he didn't understand what it meant. Throughout the station, Sarah's crew was receiving that signal. It meant Phase 2 was beginning. The alien had survived the first test, but there were many more to come. In the control room, Mike was coordinating with teams throughout the station. "Commanders in Section 7 and moving toward the mining cores," he reported. "Target is following as planned." Jenny Park's voice came through the comm system. "Gravity generators in Sections 8 through 12 are ready for remote control. Power routing is complete." Tom Wilson checked his screens. "All personnel are clear from the planned route. Emergency systems are standing by." They had trained for hostile takeover scenarios many times. Pirates, corporate raiders, even the possibility of alien attack. The plan was always the same: use the station itself as a weapon. But none of them had ever imagined they would be fighting something that strong, that fast, that confident in its own superiority. Still, they were human, and humans had learned long ago that when faced with a superior enemy, you didn't fight fair. You used every advantage you could find. Sarah's voice came through their comm units, calm and steady. Phase 3 in 5 minutes. Everyone remember your positions. Deep in the station, was beginning to understand that he was no longer the hunter. Somehow, impossibly, he had become the prey. Sarah crawled through a maintenance tunnel barely wide enough for her shoulders. The metal walls were cold against her hands, and she could hear somewhere below, searching for her. His frustrated roars echoed through the station's corridors. She reached a junction where several tunnels met and paused to check her wrist display. Her team had been busy while she led the alien through their carefully planned route. Power had been rerouted, sections had been sealed off, and gravity had been adjusted in key areas. "Commander," came Jenny's voice through her earpiece. "Target is in Section 9, moving toward the central hub. His bio readings show he's getting more aggressive." "Good," Sarah whispered back. "Keep monitoring. How are our people?" "Everyone's in position. Tom has control of the mining lasers. Mike's ready with the communication jamming. I'm standing by with environmental controls." Sarah smiled grimly. Thought he was hunting her, but really he was walking deeper into a trap that used the entire station as its mechanism. Every corridor, every room, every system had been turned into part of their defense. She began moving again, heading for her next destination. Behind her, she heard the sound of tearing metal, had found the maintenance hatch she had used and was ripping it open with his claws. The tunnel shook as his weight dropped into it. Sarah could hear him crawling after her, his armor scraping against the walls. The sound was getting closer. Sarah reached the end of the tunnel and dropped down into Section 10. This was one of the storage areas, filled with containers of mining equipment and spare parts. She had chosen it specifically because of the layout. The containers were stacked in a maze-like pattern, creating narrow paths between them. Perfect for someone who knew the layout, not so perfect for someone who didn't. Burst out of the maintenance tunnel just as Sarah disappeared between two large containers. He landed heavily on the floor, his yellow eyes scanning the area. "I can smell your fear, human," he called out. His voice bounced off the metal containers, making it hard to tell where it was coming from. "You cannot hide forever." Sarah pressed herself against a container wall and activated her comm unit. "Jenny, cut artificial gravity to Section 10. Full power to magnetic containment." "Roger that," came the reply. Suddenly, everything in the storage area that wasn't bolted down began floating upward. Tools, spare parts, and loose containers drifted toward the ceiling. Found himself floating too, his heavy body becoming weightless. But Sarah was ready. Her magnetic boots kept her anchored to the floor while her hands grabbed onto fixed anchor points. She had worked in zero gravity for years and moved through it like she was swimming through water. Thrashed in the air, trying to find something solid to grab. His species had evolved on a world with heavy gravity. This weightless environment confused and disoriented him. Sarah used his confusion to move through the floating containers like a three-dimensional maze. She appeared behind him and kicked off a container wall, driving both feet into his back. The impact sent him spinning toward a wall covered in sharp-edged equipment. He crashed into it with a satisfying thud, his armor scraping against metal edges. By the time he recovered and looked around, Sarah was gone again. "Tom," she said into her comm unit as she moved toward the next section. "Fire up the mining laser in Section 11. Low power, wide dispersal." "Copy that, Commander." Sarah reached Section 11 just as burst through the door behind her. This area housed one of the station's main mining lasers, a massive device designed to cut through solid asteroid rock. The laser wasn't pointed at him directly, but at a carefully angled piece of metal sheeting that Sarah's team had positioned earlier. When Tom activated it, The beam struck the metal and scattered into dozens of smaller beams that filled the room with cutting light. Threw his arms up to protect his eyes, but his armor began heating up where the scattered beams touched it. The smell of burning metal filled the air. "Your tricks are growing tiresome," he snarled, stumbling toward where he thought Sarah was. But she was already moving to the next phase. "Mike, jam his communications, all frequencies." Throughout the station, powerful transmitters activated. They filled the radio spectrum with static and interference. If he'd been planning to call for backup from his ship, that was no longer possible. Sarah led him through section after section, each one prepared with new surprises. In Section 12, she triggered a massive electromagnetic pulse that interfered with his armor systems. In Section 13, she released pressurized coolant that filled the air with freezing fog. Each trap weakened him a little more. Each surprise made him a little more angry and a little less careful. But was learning too. He began to anticipate some of her moves. When she tried to seal a blast door behind her, he was fast enough to jam his claws into the mechanism. When she attempted to use another gravity trap, he was ready and grabbed onto a support beam. "You fight like a coward," he called out as he chased her through a corridor lined with power conduits. "Face me with honor." Sarah laughed, the sound coming from speakers throughout the section. "Honor? You came here to terrorize civilian miners. You grabbed me by the throat and threatened to kill my crew, and you want to talk about honor." She triggered another trap. This time, electrical power surged through the metal walls of the corridor. His armor conducted the electricity, giving him a painful shock that made his muscles spasm. "Besides," Sarah continued, "humans don't fight with honor, we fight to win." The chase continued through section after section. Sarah stayed just ahead of, leading him deeper into the station's core areas, where the really dangerous equipment was located. Behind them, her crew sealed off passages and activated systems according to their carefully rehearsed plan. But Sarah was getting tired. The constant running and climbing was wearing her down, and despite the traps and tricks, was still as strong as when he had started. His species was built for endurance. Worse, he was learning the layout of the station. He began taking shortcuts, trying to cut her off. Twice, Sarah barely escaped as his claws reached for her. "Commander," came Jenny's voice in her earpiece, "your bio readings are showing fatigue. How much longer can you keep this up?" Sarah paused at a junction, breathing hard. Through the walls, she could hear moving parallel to her, no longer following but trying to predict where she was going. "Not much longer," she admitted, "but I don't need to. We're almost at the final phase." She looked ahead to where the corridor opened into the station's central core. This was where the main gravity generators, power systems, and mining equipment were all located. It was also where the asteroid's natural rotation created the most complex gravitational fields on the station. If she could get there, the real fight could begin. "All teams," she said into her comm unit, "prepare for Phase 4, target approaching the core." Throughout the station, her crew made final preparations. They had led through a maze of traps and tricks, wearing him down and making him angry. Now it was time to finish what they had started. Sarah took a deep breath and began running toward the core chamber. Behind her, she heard break through a wall rather than use the door. He was no longer trying to be clever. He was just trying to catch her before she could escape again. But Sarah wasn't planning to escape anymore. She was planning to end this. The core chamber lay ahead, its massive machines humming with power. In there, she would make her final stand, and would learn what happened when someone threatened a human crew on their own territory. Sarah burst through the airlock doors into the station's core chamber, with only seconds behind her. The room was massive, filled with the huge machines that kept the mining station running. Gravity generators hummed with deep vibrations that she could feel in her bones. The main power core glowed with blue energy in the center of the chamber. But what made this room special was its position at the exact center of the asteroid's rotation. Here, the artificial gravity systems fought against the natural spin of the rock, creating zones where gravity pulled in different directions. Sarah had spent months learning to work in this environment, had never experienced anything like it. "End of the line, human," snarled as he crashed through the doors behind her. His armor was scorched from the laser traps and his breathing was heavier than before, but his yellow eyes still burned with confidence. "No more tricks, no more running, just you and me." Sarah turned to face him, standing near a control panel covered with switches and displays. "You're right," she said calmly. "No more running, but you're wrong about one thing." "What?" "You think this is just you and me, but you're in the heart of a human-built machine now, and every system in here is designed to help me kill you." Laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the metal walls. "Your machines cannot help you now. I will tear you apart with my bare claws." He began walking toward her, his heavy footsteps ringing on the metal floor. But after his third step, something strange happened. His next step seemed to take longer to reach the ground. By his fifth step, he was moving in slow motion. Sarah had activated the first gravity manipulation. The field around was now pulling him downward with 3 times normal force. Each step became harder than the last, but was strong. He pushed forward anyway, his muscles straining against the increased gravity. "Clever," he admitted, "but not clever enough." Sarah pressed another control. Now the gravity field began rotating around him, pulling him first left, then right, then forward and back. Stumbled as his inner ear tried to adjust to the constantly changing direction of up and down. "This is what humans do," Sarah explained as she moved to a different control panel. "We take hostile environments and we master them. Your species conquered other worlds with strength and fear. We conquer entire solar systems with engineering and intelligence." Roared and lunged toward her, but the shifting gravity made him miss by several feet. He crashed into a support beam instead, his claws scraping against metal. Sarah activated the next system. Powerful magnetic field generators came online, creating invisible forces that interfered with enhanced senses. His species relied on bioelectric fields to track prey, but now those same fields were being scrambled by the magnetic interference. "You cannot see me clearly anymore, can you?" Sarah asked. "Your natural hunting instincts are useless here." Swung his claws at empty air where his senses told him she should be. But Sarah was actually 10 feet to his left, watching from behind a power coupling. She moved to the master control station and began typing commands. Around the chamber, machines that normally processed asteroid rock began reconfiguring themselves. Conveyor belts changed direction. Sorting mechanisms rotated to new positions. Crusher arms extended and retracted in precise patterns. "Tom," she said into her comm unit, "bring the primary mining beam online. Target the reflector array I've positioned." "Roger that, Commander. Mining beam charging." Heard the deep humming sound of the mining laser powering up. This was the same type of beam that could cut through solid rock 20 feet thick. If it hit him directly, even his armor wouldn't protect him. But Sarah wasn't aiming at him directly. She had spent the last few minutes positioning reflective metal plates throughout the chamber. When the mining beam fired, it would bounce from plate to plate, creating a deadly maze of laser light. "You would destroy your own station to stop me?" asked. He was beginning to sound less confident. "If necessary," Sarah replied, "but I don't think it will come to that. You see, I know something about you that you don't know about humans." The mining beam fired with a sound like thunder. The brilliant yellow light struck the first reflector and bounced to the second, then the third, crisscrossing the chamber with deadly precision. Threw himself behind a massive generator as the beams passed inches from his head. "You're used to being the biggest, strongest thing in the room," Sarah continued, her voice coming from speakers all around the chamber. Your whole strategy is based on intimidation and brute force, but humans learned a long time ago that the biggest and strongest don't always win. She activated more systems. Now industrial robots designed for handling heavy machinery began moving through the chamber. They weren't armed, but they didn't need to be. Each one weighed several tons and moved with mechanical precision. Found himself dodging between massive metal arms that swung through the air with enough force to crush bone. The robots weren't trying to hit him directly. They were hurting him, forcing him to move where Sarah wanted him to go. In human history, Sarah explained, smaller, smarter armies defeated larger, stronger ones all the time. We learned that victory goes to whoever controls the battlefield. Was being pushed toward the center of the chamber, where the gravity effects were strongest and most unpredictable. His movements were becoming more desperate, less controlled. For the first time, Sarah could see fear in his yellow eyes. "You want to know what really makes humans dangerous?" she asked. "It's not our strength or our weapons, it's that we never stop thinking. Even when we're terrified, even when we're outmatched, we're still 3 moves ahead of our enemies." She pressed the final control sequence. All around, the chamber's automated systems activated at once. Gravity fields shifted in precise patterns. Magnetic forces created corridors of interference. Robotic arms moved in coordination to box him in from all sides. And in the center of it all, finally understood what was happening to him. He wasn't fighting Sarah anymore. He was fighting an entire ecosystem of machines that responded to her will-like extensions of her body. "This is impossible," he gasped as he struggled against forces he couldn't see or understand. "No species masters their environment this completely." "You're wrong," Sarah said, stepping out from behind her control station. "Humans have been doing this for thousands of years. We turned fire into our tool. We turned metal into our weapons. We turned the vacuum of space into our highway. And now you're going to learn what happens when you threaten us in a place we've made our own." The chamber's systems began working together in perfect harmony. Gravity pulled toward the floor while magnetic fields disoriented his senses. Robotic arms herded him into a corner where the mining laser reflectors could target him most effectively. Every system Sarah's species had built to survive in the hostility of space was now focused on defeating him. Tried one last desperate attack. He threw himself toward Sarah, using all his remaining strength to fight through the gravity and magnetic interference. But his movements were sluggish and predictable now. Sarah simply stepped aside and let the automated systems catch him. Massive robotic clamps closed around his arms and legs, holding him in place. The gravity field increased until even his powerful muscles couldn't move against it. He was trapped in the center of a web of human technology, helpless for the first time in his life. "You wanted to show my species what fear looks like," Sarah said, walking over to stand in front of him. "Mission accomplished. Every alien species in this galaxy is going to hear about what happened here. They're going to learn that humans don't just survive in hostile environments. We turn them into weapons." Could only stare at her, his confidence completely broken. The predator who had terrorized dozens of worlds had been defeated by a mining engineer and her crew of technicians. But the lesson was just beginning. 6 months later, Doctor walked through the quiet corridors of Galactic Medical Station Omega Prime. Her 4 arms carried data pads filled with notes, brain scans, and psychological evaluations. As the station's chief, she had seen many difficult cases, but none quite like this one. She stopped outside a room marked High Security Medical Bay and looked through the transparent aluminum window. Inside, Warlord lay in an advanced medical pod, his massive form still healing from injuries that should have been impossible. "Patient shows continued signs of physical recovery," she dictated to her recording device. "Bone fractures in the left arm and both legs are healing normally. Neural pathways damaged by electromagnetic exposure are regenerating. However, Psychological trauma remained severe. The door slid open as she entered the room. His yellow eyes tracked her movement, but he didn't speak. He hadn't spoken much to anyone since arriving at the medical station. "Good morning," Doctor said in her calm, professional voice. "How are you feeling today?" "The same as yesterday," he replied quietly. His voice, once filled with confidence and threats, now sounded hollow. "And the day before that?" Doctor pulled up a chair beside his medical pod. In the 6 months since his encounter with the humans, she had conducted dozens of interviews with him. Each one revealed more about what had happened on that mining station and why it had affected him so deeply. "I've been reviewing the security footage again," she said, activating a holographic display. "The High Command wants to understand exactly what went wrong." The footage showed Sarah leading through the mining station. To most observers, it looked like a chase scene, a predator hunting prey through narrow corridors and industrial chambers. But Doctor had studied it frame by frame. She could see what others missed. Sarah was never really running away. Every turn, every trap, every system activation was part of a larger plan. The human had been thinking 5 steps ahead from the moment grabbed her. "She was never afraid," said, following the doctor's gaze to the hologram. "I thought she was running in panic, but she was leading me exactly where she wanted me to go." "The reports say her crew coordinated the defense perfectly," Doctor noted. 48 civilians against a trained warrior. How is that possible?" Closed his eyes. They weren't just civilians. They were survivors. Every day they lived in an environment that would kill most species in minutes. Radiation, vacuum, extreme temperatures, equipment failures that could cause explosive decompression. They had turned surviving into an art form. He paused, his claws flexing involuntarily. And then they turned their survival skills into weapons. Doctor made notes on her data pad. This case had become legendary throughout the galaxy. Military academies were studying the footage. Diplomatic corps were reassessing human capabilities. The Empire itself had quietly begun avoiding systems with human presence. "Tell me about the chamber," she said. "The core room where the final confrontation took place." Shuddered. It wasn't a room. It was a trap that had been disguised as a room. Every surface, every machine, every system was connected. When she activated them all at once, it was like fighting against the asteroid itself. He opened his eyes and stared at the ceiling. "I have conquered 47 worlds. I have broken armies and shattered the will of entire species, but I had never encountered anything like human engineering." Doctor accessed another file. "According to our analysis, the mining station was originally designed for asteroid excavation. Yet Sarah and her crew were able to weaponize it in real time." "How?" "Because humans don't just build tools," replied. "They build tools that can become other tools. Every system on that station had multiple purposes. A gravity generator could become a weapon. A mining laser could become a defense system. An ore processor could become a trap." The doctor nodded thoughtfully. This matched the reports she had received from other encounters with humans. Their technology wasn't necessarily more advanced than other species, but it was infinitely more adaptable. "The Empire wants to know if this was just an exceptional individual," she said, "or if all humans possess these capabilities." Laughed bitterly. "That's what terrifies me. Sarah wasn't exceptional. She was normal. A standard human engineer with 3 years of experience on a mining station. If she could do this, what could their military specialists accomplish?" Doctor had wondered the same thing. Reports from across the galaxy suggested that human exploration teams, research stations, and even civilian transports had successfully defended themselves against threats that should have overwhelmed them. It wasn't luck. It was something fundamental about human nature. "Your fellow warriors want to understand how to counter human tactics," she said. "What would you tell them?" Was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Don't fight them on their terms. Don't fight them in places they've had time to prepare. Don't fight them at all if you can avoid it. That's not what the High Command wants to hear. The High Command doesn't understand what they're dealing with, replied. They think humans are just another species to be conquered, but humans aren't like other species. Other species adapt to their environment. Humans make their environment adapt to them. Doctor accessed another file on her data pad. I've been studying human history. They originated on a planet with extreme weather, dangerous predators, and limited resources. Most species would have died out. Instead, they thrived. Because they learned to turn everything into a weapon, said. Rocks became hammers, sticks became spears, fire became a tool, water became a power source. They looked at the most hostile environments in their solar system and said, we're going to live there anyway. He turned his head to look directly at Doctor. Do you know what humans call the void of space? Home. They call it home. What kind of species looks at a freezing vacuum filled with deadly radiation and calls it home? The doctor made more notes. This psychological profile was going to reshape how the galaxy understood humanity, but she had one more question. If you could go back and change what happened, would you? Considered this carefully. If I could go back, I would tell my ship to avoid that system entirely, but I'm glad it happened the way it did. Why? Because now I know the truth. The Empire has spent centuries conquering worlds by convincing other species that we are unstoppable, but humans proved that we're not. They showed that intelligence and preparation can defeat raw strength. He closed his eyes again. The Empire will fall eventually. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. And when it does, it will be because we met a species that was better than us at the only thing that really matters. Which is refusing to give up. Doctor finished her notes and stood up. I'll be back tomorrow for another session. Your physical therapy is scheduled for this afternoon. As she reached the door, called out to her. Doctor, has there been any word from Sarah? Doctor smiled. Last I heard, she was promoted to Regional Mining Director. She's overseeing the construction of 12 new stations in the outer asteroid belt. Of course she is, said quietly. Building more places where humans can turn hostile space into their backyard. As Doctor left the room, she reflected on what she had learned. The encounter on Series 7 had lasted only a few hours, but its effects would be felt across the galaxy for decades to come. Humanity had served notice to every aggressive species in known space. Underestimate them at your own risk. They had taken the worst environments in the universe and made them livable. And if you threatened them there, they would show you just how creative they could be with the tools they used to survive. The age of easy conquest was over. The age of humanity had begun.